I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传是一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated. If you recall, last time I talked about how the Asian spiritual masters would oftentimes say it's a bad idea to get into a debate. And they would also say that it's usually a difficult lesson to teach Westerners, that Westerners are very stubbornly holding on to, wanting to have a debate because of the more combative nature of Western culture. So I knew that when I bring up this topic and talk about debates and how, within Asian culture it's just a bad idea, this particular chapter, chapter 79, talks about why. It says that whenever you have a dispute, no matter how it is resolved, there's going to be some resentful feelings left over. So that's not a good thing. Now, there are many other reasons for not wanting to debate, but when I bring it up, I knew already, as I brought it up, that I would get additional questions about that. Because here I am, living in Western society, speaking to a primarily Western audience. So there's going to be people who are kind of skeptical of this position. And one of the questions being asked is, well, I just want to have a discussion. I don't want to debate. And you talk about discussion as being okay, but debate as not being okay. What's the difference? A debate can be a discussion can be a debate, blah, blah, blah. So let me explain and be very clear on the distinction between the two, debates and discussion. And we'll start with discussion. Discussion, when I use the word discussion, I mean two-way communication. I mean a dialogue. I mean an exchange of two sides, a meeting of the minds, if you will, two-way communication, self-expression and clarification. That is, you explain where you're coming from and you listen to what the other side's expression as to where they're coming from. Why do we do this? Why do we have discussions? The goal is to understand, is to figure out how the other side can believe the way that it does. So seeking common ground, seeking better understanding. Very important to note that when you understand the other side better, that doesn't mean you agree with it. A lot of times we're driven by fear. And the fear is that, well, if I understand where you're coming from, that means I'm one of you. No, it does not mean that. To be able to understand where the other side is coming from just means that you don't automatically assume the other side must be crazy and nonsensical. Human beings are not crazy or nonsensical. When they have beliefs that you cannot understand, it's easy for us to assume that. But if you walk them out in their shoes, then you begin to understand, so this is why. So from their perspective, given their background, their experiences, the way they believe actually makes sense. Doesn't mean that you have to become one of them or agree with them. It just means that you get a better understanding. That's it. What about debates? Well, debates is distinctively different because it's not a dialogue or exchange or clarification, self-expression. It's primarily a clash of conflicting views. It's a battle for supremacy. I know better than you, and I'm going to prove it. So the goal is to seek domination through words. So rather than to figure out what the common ground is, the idea is to figure out where the differences are and then prove the other side is wrong. Oftentimes, advocates of debates will say, no, my goal is to get better understanding. My goal is to learn, to educate myself and others. And based on a lifetime of experience, I'm going to be very blunt and say baloney. It's the ego seeking to dominate the other side. I have seen, I'm not even going to say 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, that's the case. So it's very easy, by the way, for someone to be pretending to discuss when they actually want to debate or to call a debate, oh, we're just having a discussion. However, this kind of subterfuge, this kind of deception is eventually seen through by people who are observing and people who are participating. So, yeah, the line between discussion and debates can be blurry, can be intentionally misleading. You know, oh, we're just having a discussion. I actually want to debate. When we have time, I can provide some examples as to how that is. I can also provide examples of debating tricks. You know, I never debate anymore, but I will share with everyone that when I was in elementary school, I was a debate champion. I am ashamed to say. So, have many debating victories. I really didn't know any better. I was just a kid. Later on, as I mastered all these dirty debating tricks, these devious debating tricks, you know, initial thought was, wow, I'm going to use this as a weapon against my enemies. Later on, though, I am just disgusted. I am just averse, repulsed by these debating tricks because they really do get in the way of honest communication. They're not only deceptive to other people, but they're also self-deceiving. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to deceive myself. So if there's interest, I can talk about the debating tricks that we see very often. For now, though, I also want to add another point for everyone. This is talking about Eastern culture now, Asian culture. So in Asia, very common to avoid conflict, to avoid, debates, arguments. Why? Because such things may harm harmony. So in Mandarin, you might say, 伤和气. 伤和气, 3 characters. 伤, the first character means to harm or to injure. 和, the second character, that's the character we've been talking about. It means harmony. 气 is the spirit. So people don't want to injure or harm the spirit of harmony, and therefore they refrain from disagreements that would lead to a clash or friction. Okay, that's all very good, but in Asian cultures, it's also taken to an extreme sometimes, so that people will be much more tending toward groupthink rather than to think for themselves. Why? Because they want to agree. So if you were to ask someone's opinion about a particular subject or topic in Asia, that person may say, well, what does everyone think? You know, and that's because they don't want to say something that's different from everybody else. Well, you then get into the issue of groupthink and the lack of individual thinking for yourself. So, for everyone listening to me now, the tricky part, the challenge for you is to find the appropriate point of equilibrium between the extreme of groupthink and the extreme of the contentious, typical Western behavior of friction, fighting about things, arguing over things. There's got to be some point of moderation between the two. So that's what I'm going to say about debates versus discussions for the moment. When we're done with this particular chapter, 79, I will highlight the debating tricks that are commonly used. There are so many tricks. I'll just highlight a few, and then I will give you some examples. Not sure if we'll be able to get to it this time, but it's definitely the next item in the docket for discussions and explanations. Okay, so let's continue on with the current chapter of the Tao Te Ching. And the idea is that we want to finish it off. So let me show what the chapter looks like. And remember that we were able to divide this into 4 sections. Last time we went through two sections, section 1 and section 2, which ranges from line 1 to line 5. So section 1, the first 3 lines, is basically saying that, well, there's going to be some bad blood after the resolution of a dispute. So how can that be a good thing? So in other words, whenever you find yourself having to clash with someone, that's just a bad thing. That's generally a bad thing because, as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's harmful to the spirit of harmony. The flip side of that is that human beings are capable of incredible things when we work together in a spirit of harmony. So the conflict that we have between people get in the way of that incredible power we could wield if we had harmony within the team. So that's section 1. Section 2, the sage holds the left part of the contract, does not demand payment from the other person. Okay, so as I explained, this is the ancient way of keeping track of debts, is that you split a piece of wood, tree bark, paper down the middle, and when they are joined back together, that means the debt has been repaid. So I'm kind of simplifying a great deal, but this is what we talked about last time. So as we proceed, please keep the first 2 sections in mind. There's going to be a quiz in just a moment. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you to think about these 2 together in a specific way to test your understanding of the first half of 79. But now, let's move on. Let's talk about lines 4 and 5 and the metaphors. So this is what we were at previously, so I'm just taking sort of a half step back to make sure that we have continuity from the last talk. So basically, I think everyone understands and appreciates that 79 is not literally about lending money and then collecting on a debt. It's using the ancient tradition of managing a debt through a piece of paper, a writing medium being split apart in the middle as a metaphor for interactions with others. So, when we say the sage holds the left part of the contract, we're using this lending, borrowing metaphor to say that the sages are constantly helping people, so we can say that people owe them a debt of gratitude. That's why the sages are like lenders who hold the left part of the loan document. Now, when they have helped people, they do so without expecting anything in return, which means that if they are lenders, then they don't want to be repaid. And this is because it's the right thing to do to help people, not because they want compensation. So, even though karmically they have given other people goodness or benefits, and people owe them in the karmic sense, they don't want to collect on it. And they don't even necessarily need to have it be known that they have done good things. Okay? So, the second part is a metaphor. And now, I want to get to my question. The first 2 sections that we have seen, first part being about disputes, disputes are a bad thing. The second part is about how the sages are the lenders but not collectors. So my challenge to you is to connect the first 2 sections. How are they related or connected together? What is the sense that you can put into it? What is Lao Tzu trying to say? And please feel free that if you think you know the answer, please feel free to type it in. Okay, so let me share with you the way that I would connect the first 2 parts together. So first part about disputes, second part about the lending process used as a metaphor. But it can cover lending as well. That's part of it. That's part of our interactions with other people, is that we could potentially lend them money. So here's one connection. Oftentimes, disputes can come from the lending borrowing process, whether it's for something material like money, like a loan someone has given you, or can be someone doing a favor for you and therefore you owe them something. So lending borrowing process, as it applies to everything, that can give rise to disputes. So remember, first part is about disputes, second part is about the lending borrowing process. So what kind of disputes? Well, the borrower may be tardy in paying back the loan, like you miss a payment, that your payments are delinquent. That's a possibility. Have we seen that? Of course we have. Second part, what can lead to a dispute is that the details of the loan may be unclear. It might not be written clearly, or it's been obscured, or one side, either the lender or the borrower, is intentionally trying to cause a lack of clarity to create more favorable terms. Like, oh, I don't actually owe you $100,000. It's actually $10,000 that I owe you. You are adding one zero too many. That's one possible cause for dispute. And the other side is like, what? No, it was $100,000. So the lack of clarity could be amount, could be payment terms, could be dates, like, by what time are you intending to repay? So even more serious is the damaging effect that the loan has on personal relationships. So remember, disputes, how can it be a good thing? And then the borrowing and lending process and the repayment process, the sages have noted that this can be very damaging to personal relationships. I agree with them because I have seen it myself so many times in the last few decades. So this wisdom is not unique to Asia. Here we have a very Anglo, very Western expression of the same wisdom, and it's very explicit. It's from Hamlet. So in Hamlet, the character Polonius, here playing the role of a wise father, is advising to his son about the wisdom of living, because his son is about to leave for France. The father knows that when this young man is out there, he's going to be making friends. He's going to be blazing a trail in the world, and he wants to make sure that his son has the best chance for success. So Polonius says, neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend. So what he's saying is that if you lend money to a friend, you lose the money. You likely will lose the money that you lent to him, and you will also lose him as a friend. And the flip side is just as true. If you borrow money from a friend, you will not have that money and not have that friend. And why is that? Well, like I said, in the past few decades, I have seen this so many times. And my observation tells me the following. It's all part of human nature. Chances are, when someone is needing to borrow money, and this is usually chronic, this is usually recurring, that person seems to be constantly in need of extra assistance. Why is that? Well, it's because the borrower is financially irresponsible. The borrower is not thinking about the management of his or her own resources. But whenever there is a lack, whenever there is a desperate need, they try to get help from somewhere, and that somewhere may be you. But once you have helped this person, that doesn't mean that this person becomes suddenly financially responsible. Human nature doesn't change for the most part. So if they've been irresponsible before, chances are excellent that they will continue to be just as irresponsible, before and after the loan. So your chances of seeing that money back is not great. If this person was financially responsible, you would see it back, but chances are this person isn't. And I would say 9 times out of 10, this is the case. People that borrow money, 9 times out of 10, is because of their own financial irresponsibility. It's only 1 time out of 10 that they have a desperate, exceptional need, and they normally would never do this, but this is the one time that they have an exception. That kind of people is usually very conscientious about paying you back. It'll bother them to no end until they pay you back. Why? Because they're financially responsible. But that's usually not the case. So in the case that 9 times out of 10, what will usually happen is that the borrower will take you for granted. If you had lent them some money, they take that for granted. In their mind, they have already repaid you back, but they really haven't. So if they do pay you back part of it, maybe all of it, well, next time they need something, they're going to expect that you will be able to lend them money again. So it becomes like an addiction to lending. If you were to refuse, they get really mad at you. You don't have an obligation to lend them money, but if they don't, they kind of think you do have an obligation. If you don't live up to the obligation, well, you lent me money before, why won't you lend me money now? You're not a friend. And then, you get a lot of resentment. So the lending and borrowing process seems to be inextricably linked to resentment. So they resent you, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, I did you a favor. I lent you money so many times, and now you resent me? How does that work? Well, friendship is lost. Seen this many, many times. And even if you can resolve that dispute, still a bad thing. That's why in this particular chapter, even though Lao Tzu doesn't specifically say it, I have studied this chapter in depth, and I have formulated my own conclusion that if one of my friends were to ask me, they can borrow some funds, my response is not going to be a refusal. My response is going to be what I hope, more sage-like. I'm going to say, well, here's a little bit that I have. It's not the amount that you're asking for. You want to borrow $100, I only have $10. But this is not a loan to you. This is my gift. This is just me giving you money that you don't have to repay. Now, I know that I'm not going to miss $10 because, I'm financially responsible. I'm a saver. I do all right. So I don't need that money back. I don't want to make it a loan. If I make it a loan, I'll lose that $10 and then I'll lose that friend. So in that way, I try to become more like a sage. Always help, but never collect. So as I emphasize, this is not something that Lao Tzu says specifically. This is something that I extrapolate and use in my own life. So let's take a look at this metaphor, the 2 sides of the loan document, the left side and the right side. So to hold the left side of the contract means you have rendered assistance to others. Money is just metaphoric, so this is all kinds of assistance, material or non-material. Therefore, karmically, in terms of karma, they owe you. The other part of it, to hold the collection document, means, still the left part of the contract is the same left part we're talking about. It means you wish to be repaid for what you have done. So what happens is that having the left part of the document, meaning that you have rendered assistance, and then presenting the left part to the other party, means that you are now here to collect for what you are owed. Now, again, this doesn't have to be money. To be repaid for what you have done, it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I lend you $100, now you give me back $100 plus interest. It doesn't necessarily mean that. In this case, it can be as simple as wanting recognition and visibility to satisfy the ego. Look, everybody, I am the one who can help people when they are in need. That's because I am wealthy and they are poor. Therefore, I am superior and they are inferior. So remember, it's the ego talking. So this part is all about the exchanges, the transactions, the interactions that we have in life. Exchanges of energy, as it were. So moving on. So we're getting toward the end. The last part of this particular chapter focuses on the Tao itself. It's going to emphasize that the Tao is not a deity, it's just a principle, it's just the ultimate principle governing all other principles. It's just this thing. Not a deity, so it's impersonal, it's like natural laws. So think of it as spiritual laws. Now, in actuality, the concept Tao includes all laws, natural laws and spiritual laws. So, however things work in accordance with natural laws or in accordance with spiritual laws, they're part of the Tao. They are part of the function of the Tao. And either way, whether it's natural laws or spiritual laws, the Tao is not a person. Therefore, the Tao cannot like you or dislike you. It doesn't love you or hate you. It just is. So, you know, electromagnetic energy, gravity, the laws of motion, it can't have any emotions to you. You cannot say, oh, the theory of relativity loves me. No, it doesn't do that. So it goes back to what we talked about before. The Tao is not a deity, no emotions, no favorites. And the flip side of it is that it doesn't hate anyone either. So this is not like our typical concept of a personal deity that can have a personal relationship with you. So when it comes to the Tao, there isn't, Lord, why me? Okay, that is presupposing a deity that actually cares, that will actually inflict upon you good fortune and bad fortune. And when it's really bad, you would then say, you would have cause to say, why me? Why is this happening to me? What have I done to deserve this? So that's assuming emotions on the part of the deity. Now, the way that the Tao works is that you project positive energy, you receive positive energy, you project negative energy, you receive negative energy. Or even not talk about energy, just positivity and negativity. So people who are without virtue, in the context of this chapter, those are the ones that have, maybe previously done a favor for someone, but now they are now very demanding. You got to pay me back. Those are the ones without virtue. And they have negativity in their lives, and that's due to the impersonal function of the Tao. There's nothing personal about it. So, if you think about it, it's no different from the function of karma. And in fact, we're really talking about karma in a different way. Karma itself, not a deity, it's just the way things work. Action, reaction. Something going out makes a big circle, it comes back. So karma doesn't like you or hate you. Karma is action-reaction, and the reaction of an action has no feelings for you one way or the other. You're not a favorite. You're also not particularly hated. You're just going to get the reaction as a result of the action. So, excellent question. Same with karma. And there's also an excellent suggestion that the best way to help people is to pay it forward. I don't even like to say that anymore because it's such a cliche. I would just take care of my part. I would just provide assistance. And if people want to pay it forward, that's great. I will leave it up to them. They come back to me and say, hey, can I pay you back? Then I might say that. I might say, well, no, don't pay me back. Pay it forward to someone else. But ultimately, it's up to them. So let's do this next line. So the flip side of the negativity that we're talking about is the positivity. Those with virtue, in this context, in chapter 79, Lao Tzu describes people who are generous, people who are providing assistance without attachments, because they don't want to collect on the payment. So they're going to end up with a positive life, but it's not because they're favored by the Tao. The Tao is not a deity, so the above is true. You're going to enjoy a great life, even if you don't pray to any deities. You could be an atheist and still enjoy the working of this particular karmic mechanism. And it works. It works because the Tao is universal. It works everywhere for everyone at every possible time. And it's not because kind, compassionate people are favored by the Tao because the Tao favors no one. But the Tao will make sure that the Tao functions the way that it is supposed to function. Now, the time frame of the Tao is longer than the typical time frame for human beings. What I mean is, when you have done a good thing, when you have done a good deed, it probably isn't going to be reflected back at you right away. It may, but perhaps not. And that's because it may be taking its time to come back at you in some fashion, in some way, shape, or form. Indeed, after you have done a good deed, you may be suffering through setbacks. You may have fluctuations down. You may be undergoing things that you are not too happy about. But because you have planted a karmic seed, in the long run, everything works out great. And my last 3 words there, it has to. Because that's the way it works. So, one more slide, and then we got to do our ending slides. If you take a look at this particular slide here about helping people without attachments, end up with a positive life, you may notice that this is really just another way to phrase the teaching from a powerful symbol that I talked about before. What symbol? This symbol, the symbol of the Maitreya Buddha. The symbol that I talked about before as being usually mistaken. People look at that and say, oh, that's the Buddha. No, it's the Maitreya Buddha. It's not the Buddha. The actual Buddha, historically and also in depictions, is a skinny fellow. The Maitreya Buddha is not the Indian prince that was the original Buddha. The Maitreya Buddha was a historical figure from Chinese history, a portly monk, a portly Buddhist monk called the cloth bag monk, 布袋和尚 in Mandarin. That's the Maitreya Buddha. Maitreya Buddha is the symbol for everything that we have talked about in the previous slide. Those with virtue, generous of heart, the size of the Maitreya Buddha means the size of your heart, big heart. Providing assistance without attachments will end up with a positive life. That is why the Maitreya Buddha is happy and laughing and smiling. Generosity leads to a life of abundance and prosperity. That's the lesson of the Maitreya Buddha. So if you don't want to work your way through chapter 79 of the Tao Te Ching, that's okay. You can just look at the Maitreya Buddha and get that lesson compressed in one image. So that's the very end of the line-by-line explanation of 79. We still haven't done this next part yet, the paraphrase of 79, and we have to move on to the ending slides in the summary. So let me do that. We'll do the paraphrase next time. For now, let me go to the end. So the takeaways, the first two we talked about previously. The last one we talked about today. So quick review, incorporate he into your life. That's harmony. Means avoiding friction, conflict, debates. There's usually a better way. Provide help without expectations. Provide assistance without attachments. Be like the sage. And then lastly, this is a suggestion from me, not from Lao Tzu. Do not borrow from or lend to friends. And yes, it's a suggestion from Shakespeare, or at least one of Shakespeare's characters, Polonius. So what I would suggest and recommend is to learn to be self-sufficient so you don't have to ask anyone for help. There are many different ways to learn financial self-sufficiency. Many resources, especially in this day and age. On the other hand, when people are in desperate need, I would suggest that you help as you can and provide them with something, some measure of your generosity without damaging your ability to give. So make it a gift. Make it a gift from you to them. Plant a karmic seed for yourself. So let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位点传十一鞠躬，斜翻一鞠躬。We're done, everybody. Thank you so much.